Hello there, and welcome to this third webinar in the Design Cluster series for your TAE from Success Training Academy. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into these learning modules. I'm really hoping that you are enjoying the content so far, and it's really helping you broaden your knowledge, give you some skills, confidence to really attack your assessments when you get to doing your assessments. Okay, so as always, if you've got any questions, feel free to send your questions through to the office, and they'll be more than happy to help you out in academic sense as well. So this third webinar learning module is all about what's the preparations that you need to do when you're putting together your program. What the key things do you need to think about as you're putting together your session plans, your TAS, and all those documents? From a training perspective, what's critical to keep in mind? And how can we find out the right information? What questions do we need to ask our clients? And how can we make sure that the overall program is a great success that meets our clients' expectations? Okay, so this webinar is all about the mindset to prepare for training. And ultimately, what are the steps that we would go through in order to plan for a successful training program for a client or for an individual or for a corporate engagement, so to speak. So let's get into it, okay? And as I always say, tips are getting the most out of these recorded webinars. Have a notepad available. Be prepared to do the activities as we go through them. Have a do not disturb sign on your desk. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the training cycle and a bit of an introduction to learning, but mostly what are the steps that you're going to go through in order to plan your actual rollout of the program. Okay. So the training cycle, there's a number of steps to the training cycle, and you may look at this and think maybe things should be in a different order. That's fine. These are just some suggested milestones that you would go through as you are planning your program. So number one, analyze the training need. You would get together with a client and discover what's going on for them. And you may even decide that training is not actually the best option. However, we'll look at that later. You analyze the training need, and also at the back of your mind, be thinking, is this a need that you personally can fulfill or not? Stage two there is develop the learning program. Okay, 3 is identify the delivery requirements. 4 is develop the training plan. 5 is develop the session plan. 6 is deliver the training, and 7 is assess and evaluate the training. Okay, step number 7 there is a critically important step in the entire cycle there. Okay, and you may go through the entire cycle more than once. If you were, for example, delivering a program, you may even evaluate the program at the 3rd month or the 6th month, and you may make adjustments and do the entire cycle again as well. All right, so let's piece it all together. Training needs analysis. What are we actually trying to do? Well, we're trying to get to the root cause problem of what's actually sparked the training, and also what is the ultimate outcome of the training. Because if we can identify what the ultimate outcome is, then we're going to be able to know if we got there, and also we'll be able to know if we have satisfied the client. Okay, and when I say client, it could be student, it could be an employer, or it could be a group of students. Okay, so this is pretty much a synonymous thing regardless of who the target is. Okay, so when we're looking to do a training needs analysis, we're looking to identify the actual need of the training. We're looking to identify the current state. So where are things at the moment, and where do they want to be? So there's always going to be a current situation. Maybe there's a lot of customer complaints. Maybe the level of customer service is quite low. Maybe the overall store experience is not great. Okay, but when you ask the client where do they want to be, well, maybe they say, we want our customers to have a phenomenal customer service experience. We want our staff to be motivated. We want, lots of sales. And when you ask those questions, where are you now? Where do you want to be? Then you can look to fill in the gap with the training solution. And obviously, the training solution is whatever you are proposing in order to upskill those staff. Okay. So, I want to share with you 4 magic questions to ask individual learners that are really powerful to help you understand your learners and basically in life, if you don't like the answer you're getting back, you obviously need to change the question. There's a number of questions in HR or in a training needs analysis that sometimes don't give us the answers that we're truly looking for. So, for example, if you asked a person, what are your biggest strengths? They're going to really struggle with that answer because they don't know what strengths that it's okay to tell you. Also, if you ask someone, what's your biggest weakness? They're again going to struggle with that because they may say a weakness that could be completely inappropriate. They may say a weakness that actually isn't true, and they may even draw a mind blank because they just don't feel comfortable sharing such a topic, and they're going to manufacture their answer. Okay, so what I've discovered over time is that if you use the following 4 questions, you're going to get some really clear understanding and even empathy, maybe, for the person you're speaking to and their potential learning needs and potential learning opportunities as well. So let's take a look at the questions. So the first question is there, what aspects of your job do you enjoy doing the most? What aspects of your job do you enjoy doing the most? Okay. Now, the reason I ask this question is I want to find out ultimately what do they enjoy, but more so, what areas do they feel confident and comfortable in, and potentially even their strengths. Okay. Because someone is always going to nominate what they feel strongest in when they say, I enjoy XYZ. Okay. Now, the second question is, what aspects of your job do you find the most challenging? Okay. Now, again, by asking this question, we're going to immediately elicit somebody's weaknesses, and we're going to find out where they're struggling the most. Okay. Now, the next question is, what would you love to be doing in the next 3 to 5 years? Okay. This is going to tell us their dreams, their aspirations, and definite growth areas. A reason that we say 3 to 5 is that it still has a aspect of imagination to it and future possibility. The reason why we don't say 12 months is because that's too soon. Okay. And most times people think, 12 months, it's probably just going to be the status quo, nothing much has changed. But in 3 to 5 years, that's still possible for someone to go, well, let's imagine some things because, in 3 years, things can be radically different. Now, next thing we want to ask is why? Because when we ask why, why is that important to you, or why would you want to do that? Or, yeah, exactly, why do you want to do that? We can really get a sense of what could be their driving motivator. So let me run an example by you. So if you say to someone, what aspects of your job do you enjoy the most? And someone says, well, actually, I really love the training delivery. I really enjoy that. I really love interacting with students. Okay, great. Then if you ask them the question, what aspects of your job do you find the most challenging? And then they say, well, I find the paperwork really challenging and I really struggle to understand compliance and the admin, and I find it really challenging to write up reports. Okay. So then you ask them a question, what would you love to be doing in the next 3 to 5 years? And they say, well, I'd love to be in a training management role. Okay. And then you ask them the question, well, why? And they say, well, I want to make more money. I want to have more influence on people. And, I think that would just be great to have control and authority. And, definitely I want a promotion. Now, immediately you can start to see a bit of an issue there because as they grow into that managerial role, there's going to be paperwork, there's going to be more admin stuff that's going to be required, and maybe you need to have a conversation with that person and maybe realign those expectations. You need to make sure that where they want to head is reasonable and also aligns to what they actually enjoy doing. Now, these questions are great to ask yourself at the beginning of every year as well, or at the end of every year, and do a bit of an evaluation or a stock take on your own career. Because when you can ask yourself authentically, what aspects of my job do I enjoy the most? You start to thrive on the things that you enjoy doing. What aspects of my job do I find the most challenging? If you can allocate those challenging tasks to other people, then you're going to find that you are more energetic, you're more efficient, and you just get things done faster because you're operating in your genius. Okay. Next 3 to 5 years, great question to ask yourself to set yourself future goals. Why is that important? That's going to help you really identify, well, what motivates you. Okay. So the power of these four magic questions is very, very big. And the more that you apply these questions, the more that you apply these questions, the more you're going to get great results from them. All right. So get in the habit of asking these questions to other people, and certainly ask them of yourself, and start to see the kind of answers that come out, and be authentic about the answers. And they're great questions to just ask every staff member in your office to just get a sense of who they are, and even job allocation, because maybe you've given the wrong task to the wrong person, and maybe though like two staff members actually swap tasks, things would get done a lot quicker. All right, so there's something to think about as you are planning your training. Now, we need to ask our learners some questions. Then these questions are really going to help us understand how to train them and even who they are as learners. Okay, so the first question is, what have you studied in the past? Okay, that's going to give us a bit of an insight into who they are, what areas of interest they may have. Okay, number two, what type of learning do you enjoy the most? Okay, just be open to whatever they tell you. Another version of that question is, what was your best learning experience, or what have you enjoyed learning in the past? Okay. Number three, what types of trainers do you find the most difficult to learn from? Really powerful question. Number four, what do you get most frustrated? What do you get most frustrated when you are being trained? Or what frustrates you the most when you are being trained? Okay. Or under what circumstances do you get frustrated when you're being trained? Okay. Number five, if you could achieve anything beyond your current capabilities, what would you love to be able to do? Really powerful question. Number six, what do you believe is stopping you the most? All right. Great coaching questions. Really, really powerful. Okay. And maybe you need to ask them a couple of times as well. So they say, well, I believe that, my ability to read and write properly is really stopping me the most. Okay, great. Then ask them, what else do you believe could be stopping you? Then ask them, what else could be stopping you? All right. And really be willing to dive deep. All right. So now, as you are thinking about your audience, you want to really understand their needs, wants, desires as much as possible, and you also want to see on a, I guess, big picture overview, what's their background, and also what would you really appreciate knowing before you started doing your planning. All right, so we've got these questions that we can ask them. Now let's also ask them some questions that's going to really direct our training and how it's delivered. So first question there is, what is their motivation level towards studying? Okay, it could be very high, could be very low. It really could be a broad range on the spectrum of motivation levels. What's their LLN levels? It's critically important that you understand if they can, how well they can read, write, do numbers. If you've watched the LLN webinar, then let's go specific on the 5 core LLN skills. So learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy. Okay. Next one, what experience have they had with the topic so far? Maybe they've already studied it for 5 years. Maybe they've never heard of the topic at all right? So you definitely want to find that out and come up with some way of grading that, so to speak. What potential roadblocks have gotten in the way of them succeeding up till now? Next, what benefits will there be for them if they complete the training? Okay, this is a really important one for you to know because you can communicate this to them in the beginning of a session. Okay, if there's no buy-in from the learners, it's going to be a very tough training. Okay, next, what will be the consequences if they don't complete the training? Okay, again, a really important one to keep top of mind and be able to communicate to them at the beginning of a training session. How urgent is the problem? Okay, many times the HR department or learning and development individuals say, oh, the problem is, really critical. Okay, but then when you ask them, well, how much money do you want to spend on it? They'll go, oh, we don't want to spend that much at all. Okay, which would indicate to you that probably the problem isn't that urgent at all. Okay, and what mode of learning does or would be most suitable? Okay. Next, time availability for learners. How much time will they have to complete their study? Will it be done in work time, outside work time, all those different things, okay? And the time availability also relates to, will they be able to attend a 2-day workshop or a 3-day workshop? Okay. Access to venue for training and where will it take place? Okay, critical question to ask. Okay, now what don't you know about your audience? Okay, so it's critically important that we identify all the things that we may not know. Okay, so these are the things that you may know. Okay, or that you could be able to find out. So what do you know about your audience? Okay, and you may already know that they're male, female, that they've studied it previously, that they've got some interest in the topic. You may know some various things. But what we need to get very good at is listing those things out that we actually do know, okay? Because it's going to create a personal bias on the situation. But then we need to list out, well, what don't you know, okay? And maybe these things are like, well, I don't know if they're going to come by car or public transport. I don't know how they feel about other people in the training room. I don't know what their hobbies are. Maybe I don't know what relationships are in the training room in terms of, tension that may be existing between staff members. Maybe I don't know how the students feel about their manager. Maybe I don't know what cultural and ethnic backgrounds people could come from. And I really encourage you to list out all the different things that you don't know about your audience, okay? Now, by doing so, it's really going to help you remember the most critical thing about training planning, okay? And that is the following fact. All training, it's not about me. And what I mean by that is that very often as a trainer, we can fall into the trap of believing that training, it's all about us, the trainer. And we need to remind ourselves that training, it's got nothing to do with the trainer. Training, it's not about me, it's all about them, i.e. the learners. It's not about me, it's all about them and how they need to hear the content so that they can achieve it. Okay, so I'll say it again, it's not about me, it's all about them and how they need to hear it so that they can achieve it. I'll say it again. It's not about me. It's all about them and how they need to hear it so that they can achieve it. And when I say hear it, it really implies both visually, auditorially, and kinesthetically. Because the fact is that unfortunately or fortunately, as humans, we will typically train to our own style. We will train to our own style. So if you are a particularly visual person, guaranteed you're going to be using a lot of PowerPoints, okay? It's just how human nature works because we're going to have an underlying unconscious belief that everybody else is a visual learner. Of course they are, right? Or if we are extremely auditory, we're going to have an underlying belief that everybody learns through discussions. Okay. If we're kinesthetic, we're going to have an underlying consistent unconscious belief that everybody learns through activities and activities alone. Now, that's okay, but if you are training other individuals, you need to remember that everybody has mixed learning needs, all right? And you need to make sure that you are catering for everybody in your training room, okay? So it's a really great thing to put up in your room, wherever you're planning your training, in your office, wherever it may be, to put up a big sign that says, it's not about me, it's all about them, and how they need to hear it so that they can achieve it. The other aspect of this is you will be able to get over your nerves for training as well. Because many times people get nervous, and nervous and anxiety comes up because people have a belief that they are being extremely judged by their audience. But when they realize that the training literally has nothing to do with the trainer, it's all about the audience and equipping and empowering them to succeed, then you can really free yourself from that pressure. Okay, so training, it's not about me, it's all about them and how they need to hear it so that they can achieve it. Okay. All right, so we want to develop a learning program, okay? So we want to identify what skills they need to be able to acquire, okay? We want to find the units that would be appropriate in order to help them acquire those skills, all right? We want to create a plan in alignment with the packaging rules, for sure, and I'm hoping by now you've understood what packaging rules are, and remember that from training.gov.au, it'll tell us the core units and it'll tell us the elective units that we need to pick out. Okay, we need to identify the logistics for sure, you know, time, place, length, things like that in equipment. Okay, we need to create a proposal plan for the person in charge. Okay, so let's get into some aspects of doing the above. Okay, so let's put our learning and development manager's hat on for a second. Okay, and we need to realize that there's always going to be conflict. Okay, there's always going to be conflict about what the organization wants and what the individual learner wants. Okay, now I won't ask you to do it. However, as I describe it, you'll immediately be able to associate to this. So let's look at the organization. What do they want? Well, they want the training to cost as less as possible, right? They want the training to be as quick as possible. They want there to be minimal disruption to work, okay? They want the trainees or learners to study outside work time, okay? And they certainly, if they can avoid it, they don't want to have to pay for the training, okay? Or if they do, they want to keep it as low as possible. They want to do it on their location or at their location. They don't really want to have their trainees go off-site, okay? So now let's look at the individuals. They want to be paid for the training. They want it to happen pretty much on-site, if not as close as possible to where they work. Okay, they want to do it during work time, or if they're really busy, they want to do it at really quiet times. What else? They want to have time during work to be able to work on their assessments. They want, if it's tricky skills and rather high level knowledge, they want to have as much time to practice as possible. Okay, and they certainly would prefer the organization to pay for it. Okay, that's certainly going to be a need or a desire for them. The individual, what else do they want? Well, they want to make sure that they can access the learning maybe online. Okay, they want to get through it as quick as possible, for sure. And I guess that would be a similarity across both stakeholders there. But ultimately, the individual also wants an eventual outcome, and they want to know exactly why they are doing something. Okay, so if you say to an individual, well, we need you to do this training full stop, and you don't actually give them a reason, for an individual, they may not really buy into that. However, if you said to them, if you complete this training, it will be part of your I guess, career development, and at the end of it, it's going to lead to possible promotions, future salary increases, things like that. If you can actually tie it to what they want, they're going to be more excited about it. Okay. On the organization side, they probably just want reduced complaints and more sales. Okay, or less safety incidents and accidents, whatever it might be. But we need to make sure that an individual and an organization has very different needs, wants, and desires. Okay. And this is where empathy for the learners really comes in. And you need to identify what's in it for them. Okay. Because if you go into a training group and say, you have to complete this training or else, it may not go very well. Okay, so you need to unpack, well, what are the benefits for the individual to go through the training? Literally on an individual level, not as a staff member, the benefits will be, well, yes, but then go to a deeper level and go, all right, well, we've got Bob and we've got Mary and we've got Tim, and, you know, for them, what specifically is going to be a real benefit for the training? Okay, organization, what are the benefits of the organization going to be? Okay, so this planning stage is really, really important. Okay, so now, identify delivery requirements. So we need to ask ourselves what equipment is needed. Okay, you need to list it out. Okay, and don't assume anything. Remember, pens, paper. Don't assume students are going to bring it. Make sure it's available. Okay, maybe you've got higher level equipment. Maybe you need access to a vehicle. Maybe you need laptops. The number of times that training requires laptops, you put in the purchase order, you put in the request, or you tell students, everybody bring your laptop, and you have one or two students that don't bring their laptop. Okay, so you need to be very specific about the equipment that's going to be required. You need to make sure that's going to be available on the day. Okay, where does it need to be done? Okay, how long will it take? What steps should it be taught in? All right, a really critical question, because obviously you want to start from the easiest to the more complex skills. Okay, whose buy-in will you need? Okay, now training environment, a really important topic. So I want you to think about the top 10 resources or ideal characteristics of any venue that you would train in. Okay, now every training context and scenario is going to be slightly different. For example, you may have an ideal scenario as literally being a boardroom like we've got here. You may have another scenario, which is like a first aid training where you need a wide open space where you can certainly practice scenarios. You may have another image in your head where you need a hotel venue where you can put students in rows or U-shape, and you need ample space in between the desks. Okay, and you've really got to nut this out, because if you get to a venue that's not appropriate, it's often far too late. Okay, so top 10 resources, ideal characteristics of the venue. All right, so you want to think about the shape of the room and the furniture. So are you going to make it U-shape, classroom style, a lecture style, theatre style, buffet style? What I mean by that is, round tables where everybody sits around the tables. All these different things to think about, okay? And depending on the context, depending on the content, depending on the learners, depending on the number of learners, there's always going to be a better shape for the room, okay? And also trainers have their own preference as well, all right? So you got to find out what works for you, find out what works for the learners, and go from there, okay? Equipment, all right, definitely list that out, okay? Noise levels, that's both inside the room itself, but also outside the room. Is there going to be much noise of public people going past? Is there going to be noise level of other people working around them or working around your training, okay? Space to move around, width, height, okay? Height. If you're getting students to do activities, is there enough space between students as well? Flip charts, whiteboards, will they be available? Okay. Personally, I believe that you should never train without a flip chart or without a whiteboard. It is critical to have. Okay, chairs, tables, all right. Are they sturdy? Are they big enough? Do they have enough room for everybody to put their paperwork down? Okay. Wi-Fi and technology will be available. Okay. Wheelchair access, critically important because you never know, maybe one day you have a learner that's in a wheelchair. Okay. Lighting, safety. Lighting is a critically important one because if it's too bright, that's an issue. If it's too dull, that's an issue. Okay. So you want to make sure that there is enough light in the area. All right. When I say area, I mean the where the proximity of a study is taking place. Okay. I have seen places where it's got very dull lighting, particularly underground. And when I mean underground, sort of if you go into basement 1 or basement 2, sometimes hotel venues have their conference rooms underground, and that's fine, but you just need to double check the lighting. Okay, something that we don't always remember to do. Sometimes we take it for granted. Okay, safety. Certainly, you want to remember the evacuation points and make sure that learners know exactly how to get there. Interruptions, all right? Are there going to be people knocking on the door and interrupting your training? Are there going to be people in your training that are going to be taking phone calls that are urgent and stepping out? All right, it is one of the most tricky things to navigate, and making sure that the business is still able to operate. However, the learners are focused on what they are going through and learning from you. Okay. Cost is another big issue to take into consideration. Cost of the venue, parking, huge one, and then distance to travel. Okay. So when you are doing all of that, you definitely need to develop a session plan, all right? And you need to start with imagining what a competent person would look like, and then think about activities that would allow students to practice the skills to become that competent person or the competent person. So one of the best things that you can do is when you're planning a session, close your eyes and think, okay, well, if I've got a competent nurse, for example, what are they doing on a daily basis? And obviously, that's going to correlate to the units of competency. And obviously, if you're from the field of nursing, it's going to be a huge asset. But close your eyes and just watch them working throughout their day and start to notice, well, what are they doing? How are they communicating? What are they writing down? And what do they believe about themselves? What do they believe about the job? And start to write down all of those core skills or skill sets that you see in your mind as you think of that competent person. And then what you want to do is create activities that immerse a learner in the skills, okay? And role plays are fantastic for this. Simulated scenarios are fantastic for this. Getting people to also themselves close their eyes and imagine themselves being a competent person is a really powerful technique. But ultimately, you want to make sure that there is full engagement into the experience. So PowerPoint, it works and it's a way to deliver knowledge, but there is certainly skills and techniques that you're going to learn in the delivery cluster that are going to show you how to deliver PowerPoint effectively. Unfortunately, most people inadvertently create death by PowerPoint simply because they do not know any other alternative. Okay, so as much as possible, PowerPoint is your last resort. It's not your first resort. I would much prefer that you got used to creating activities, role plays, discussions, and then last of all, PowerPoint to back up those things. Okay, so that's a really healthy way to start your planning. All right, start with the end in mind. Don't start with the PowerPoints in mind. Okay, so what is the purpose of a session plan? Why bother with a session plan? Well, ultimately, from an audit perspective, if there is no evidence, then ultimately it hasn't happened. Okay, so the purpose of a session plan is to basically build consistency across all trainers. Okay, so Um, the key reason to have session plans is to delegate and build consistency across all trainers. So what we mean by this is you really, if you're the trainer and you have some phenomenal ideas and you love how you deliver the course, well, unless that's actually notated, written down, and described effectively, and you can't expect anybody else to replicate your genius. Okay, so it needs to be very clearly articulated in the session plan what's going to happen. Okay, so that's why we do them. They may seem like they are a bit of a how do I put it? A bit of a nuisance to write, and for creative people, sometimes it's hard because they just want to get in there and get it done, and just really enjoy thinking on the spot and all of that. However, we need to record everything that we do. Okay. So, what does a great session plan include? Well, you can see from this list here that it includes, safety information, housekeeping, equipment. Okay, key takeaways. What we mean by key takeaways is what do you want a learner to remember at the end of the session? Also, from an activity, what do you want your learners to focus on? Okay, resources. Okay, timings for different activities, homework. Trainer's name is obviously a good thing to put in there. Location, so where it's going to happen. Okay, PowerPoint slide numbers, because maybe you're going to at a particular point you're going to show slide number 5 to 10 or 20 to 22. Maybe in between the slides you're going to do some different things as well. Activity instructions for sure, music, break times, okay, icebreakers, handouts, activity instructions, and extra resources you may have for the activities, video links. So that an assessor can, a trainer can easily access the links. Also, maybe be able to provide those links to students, and whiteboard notes, what needs to go on the whiteboard, and flip chart notes as well. Okay. So now let's think about conducting a training needs analysis for large groups. Okay, analyzing the training need. We're still on that topic, but now let's shift gears. We're going to look at larger groups. Okay, so typically training needs 4 main segments that it will typically address. So we've got business goals, performance appraisals, performance management, okay, problem solving, career, personal development. These are some of the reasons that we may look to provide training, okay, and different areas that it will touch on and certainly influence. Okay, so what's the process that we will go through? Well, we look at who are they, okay, what needs to be done, how does it need to be done, where does it need to be done, and when does it need to be done? The when and the where could be sort of changed in order. But sometimes the when is more important than the where. Okay. So, stages and training needs analysis process. So, number 1 there is get to know the client for sure. Next, determine the need for training. Number 3, what is the skills gap? Next, understand the learner group. Next, consider industry and stakeholder needs. And 6, determine the delivery mode and model. Okay. So basically this is just a summary of what we've sort of already gone through, but I think it's a great graphical representation of the training needs analysis process. Okay, so on the side there you've obviously got some ways that you can unpack that information on the left there. Okay. So getting to know the client, analysing the need for training. All right. So how can we do that? Well, we could do it through face-to-face interviews with learning and development manager, HR manager. We could do it through online research about the current challenges and issues of an industry. We can interview current employees. We can ask customers what their major complaints are, or if they've got any complaints at all. We could ask this about staff's prior qualifications and training completed. Obviously, that's a very important thing for us to know because it's going to tell us their skill levels and things that they may already know that they don't need to be trained on again, or maybe they've been completely mistrained in the past. Okay. Then obviously we've got training.gov.au because that's going to be the hub of information that we use in order to develop our training. Okay. So understanding the client's reason for training needs is critical. Okay. So here are some suggested training needs analysis questions that you can ask the HR manager or even any of the other key stakeholders. Okay. So number one there, what would you love your staff to be able to do even better? Okay. Top 6 things. What would you love them to be able to do? Okay. Next, what are your staff's biggest challenges in achieving those things? Okay. Next, what trainings have you run in the past? Okay. Next, what mode of learning has worked quite well in the past? Next, what constraints or limitations are you currently facing providing training? Next, what are the current characteristics of your staff within your organization? And that's a great one to ask because the staff as a group will have characteristics, but also individuals will have characteristics as well. Okay, and it's a living entity. Okay, how would they respond to the training that you are looking to offer? Okay, these questions, the value is in asking them, not just knowing them. All right, so you'll be surprised at the answers that you get when you actually ask these questions. But sometimes we don't know the questions to ask in order to get the information we truly need. Okay, so I highly recommend that you write those questions down, you take a photograph of those questions that are on the slide there, because they are really, really powerful. And the question that you don't ask is always going to come back and bite you. Okay, so further questions. Where would the training be taking place, or where would you love it to be taking place? What resources will be available? Okay, when would you prefer it to happen? What are the LLM levels of the participants? What is the current morale of the team? Okay, really, really important question to ask. Are there any foreseeable challenges in all members attending the training? Okay. Ultimate training needs analysis question of all time. Okay, the ultimate. Let me just go back on that slide there, and I'll just leave that up for a moment so that you can write those questions down. If not, take a photograph of it. But again, the quality of the data you get back is going to come back to the quality of the information that you ask for. Okay. And the number of times I haven't asked these questions and then turned up at a location and been, rather surprised at lack of resources, or even I've had learners come in that were very ill and deficient. However, it came back on me. I hadn't asked the question, or even the learners themselves had not disclosed the information. Okay. So hopefully you've had a chance to get those down. Okay, here's the ultimate training needs analysis question of all time, and I love to ask this question. A really powerful question that you can ask in any context, really, but in 6 to 12 months' time, looking back, let's just imagine that you had decided to implement a training program. How would you know that you had made the right decision? What specifically would be different? Okay, now this is a great question to ask because it's going to tell you what is the other party's success criteria. So they would maybe say something like, well, let me think about that. Probably our staff are smiling more. Probably we're having less errors in data entry. Maybe we're getting happier customers. We're getting more positive customer feedback. Maybe our attrition rates for staff are lower. Maybe, let's see, maybe sales have even gone up by 3%. Okay. And then you certainly want to ask, is there anything else that you would have to see? Is there anything else? Is there anything else? Is there anything else? By asking that question, you're going to really ascertain for that individual what is the key success criteria that would have to be in place and that would have to be achieved. And when you know that, then ultimately you're able to make a lot better decisions, and you're able to really shape and tailor the program towards their needs as you go forward. Okay, but if you don't ask this question, there may be some unsaid expectations. Okay, so understand your learner group. Okay, now, so far what we've been doing is certainly asking a lot of those questions that would help us understand the learner group, but now let's look at it from a different angle. Okay, so we need to understand their characteristics, and we need to understand them certainly personality-wise, but skills and knowledge, is really, really important. But there's going to be some psychological factors as well. So, for example, we've got job security. Are you training individuals that are on the edge and worried if they're going to lose their job? Like, are they in a situation where they're very happy and they've got great job security? Okay, it's a great one because it's going to determine the amount of anxiety or stress that learners may be under as they're receiving the training. Okay, LLM levels. What psychological concerns may they have about their own LLM abilities? Okay, male, female, other. Right? Are you going to be training mostly males or mostly females or other? All right, these times, this day and age, I have to include the other. Okay, technology literacy. Okay, and some people feel very confident with computers, other people don't. Well, you need to factor that level of confidence and belief into your training as well. Okay, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Okay, with your learners, you need to remember that training is not about you, it's all about them and how they need to hear it so they can achieve it. So what that implies is that you have actually looked at their characteristics and looked at, do I have more visual, more auditory, more kinesthetic, and also how do I make sure that I keep my training balanced, okay? Motivation levels. Hostages versus ready learners. Now, the definition of a hostage is basically somebody that's being forced to be in the training, okay? And they're certainly a little bit trickier to work with. However, you can work with them, and I'll share strategies on how to do that later in the delivery cluster. But ready learners, certainly you want to know if you've got really motivated and excited learner, that's great. But you want to know the continuum of from hostages to excited learners. Where would your learners fit on that continuum? Okay, previous learning experience. Excuse the typo there. That's going to help you really map out any attitudes that could be pre-existing. Okay, night shift, day shift, that's also going to impact their energy levels. Okay, understanding your learner group, things that we don't talk about. Okay, now even showing this slide, I mean, oh, can we talk about it? Well, here's the thing. These things will impact training and provide an undercurrent, an undertone to how a trainee and learner shows up. Okay, so if we come back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, their learner's number one need is that for feeling of safety and security. Okay, and if they don't have that, then you're not going to be able to teach them very much at all. Okay, so distractions at home, that's certainly going to impact their attention and their focus. Health issues. If they're in pain, then that's not going to it's not going to allow them to again be present, be focused. All right. So, for example, if someone's recently had surgery on their leg, then that's going to be taking up most of their real estate in their mind. Okay. If somebody has mental health issues. That's another thing, all right? The commute, all right? If they've had to spend 3 hours on the tram or train to get to the training, then obviously when they get to the training, they're going to be a little bit tired, okay? Or if it was just 10 minutes, then obviously they're going to have a little bit more energy, okay? Pets. Pets is a funny one. You often get sick pets or pets that need taking care of, whatever, right? So that can impact the learner's ability to focus and all that. Thoughts towards their job, their boss, other team members. All right, that's definitely going to impact the dynamics. Thoughts towards the topic of the training. Okay, maybe it's a topic they don't believe they actually need training in. Maybe it's a topic that they think they've done 1,000 times, or maybe it's a topic that they're really excited about hearing about and really excited about developing their skills in. Okay, so we need to work out the nuts and bolts for sure. We need to work out our timelines, and trust me, it will always take longer than the company thinks. Okay. If you really want to upskill an individual and give them the required skills and knowledge, it will always take longer than you think or they hope. Okay, budget. You need to be realistic around the budget for what's going to be required for resources. And there's so many times where companies don't want to spend the money, but they want the outcome. Okay, you need to certainly outline the process and step out. All right, what does a competent person look like? Let's work with the end in mind for that. And you need to certainly set up meetings as well to persuade and influence. Okay, defining the client's needs, analyzing the need for training. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why training needs may be there. So we've got maybe the introduction of new technology. Okay, increasing productivity is certainly a need that companies have. Licensing, or to satisfy licensing requirements, maybe licensing has come into an industry and it wasn't there previously, and everyone needs to be upskilled on it. Okay, improving WHS practices. Maybe there's too many accidents in the organization and that needs to be changed. Okay, promotions for sure, upskilling workers, career change. Oh, sorry, promotions. Maybe someone stepped into a role but they don't have the skills yet. Okay, so you need to train them up. Career change, certainly that maybe you've got someone that's stepping into a different role within the organization. Employee reward and recognition, maybe as a reward that you're going to train them to do something. Okay. So client expectations are always interesting, but we need to make sure that we are engaging with stakeholders and industry as we are putting together our program. Now, as part of the TAS, you need to make sure that you are talking to stakeholders, management or supervisory staff, the employees who will be trained. All right, definitely important to get their perspective, the employer or supervision or supervisor of an individual. Their input is critical, and the shareholders. Okay, all official TASs must show some form of industry engagement. There's actually two standards that really specifically relate to that. So the RTO's training assessment practices are relevant to the needs of industry and informed by industry engagement. The RTO implements a range of strategies for industry engagement and systematically uses the outcome of that industry engagement to ensure the industry relevance of A and B there. All right, so it's critically important that we actually reach out to industry to get their perspective. Okay, now the SSOs. These are obviously the people and the organization that we'd reach out to get further perspective on I guess what's going to be most industry relevant. Okay, and what I recommend that you do is you go to each of these SSO websites and you actually identify, well, who is the SSO that looks after your training package? As I mentioned previously, PwC, for example, looks after the TAE training package and business services. For example, Skills IQ looks after the health training package, okay? And it's really important that you get to know your service skills organization, okay? Because they're the industry bodies that are really going to help you understand if you are putting together programs that meet industry needs. Okay, so what SSO looks after what training package? Certainly an activity that I recommend that you do. Okay, so who would you call in your industry for industry engagement? Okay, so let's imagine it was you were working in hospitality. Well, you would probably call hotel owners, nightclub owners, all right, because they're going to give you the best perspective about what's going on in the industry. Okay, so developing training goals, you definitely want to keep them smart. So for example, a great quality goal falls into has the criteria of being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And you want to set yourself goals for the training that fall into those criteria. Okay. So determining the best delivery mode. So I'm going to give you a moment to come back here and have a think about your last training session and think about do you believe that the goal was defined enough? Do you feel that the trainer was really specific about the goal? And think about going forward, what goals would you really set for your next training going forward? Okay. Alrighty, so hopefully you started to think about goals. Now, for me personally, whenever you are starting out a training session, you want to make sure that you really elicit and articulate and share with your learners what the specific goals will be. So I love the wording of, by the end of the session, you will be able to do X, Y, Z, okay? And the more you can make it realistic and relatable for the learners, the better. Okay, so it would be a strange and weak goal to say by the end of the session you'll be better public speakers. Okay, that's probably not going to be as powerful as if you said to the students by the end of the session you will have understood and been able to use at least two new audience engagement techniques and be able to put those into practice in your next presentation. Right? That's going to be a much better articulated goal. Okay. Another one could be by the end of the session, you will be able to change nappy. I'm just using this example for childcare. By the end of the session, you'll be able to change a nappy to the standard required for XYZ childcare centre and to the standards required for that childcare centre. Cool. I mean, that's pretty much all you need. Or by the end of the session, you'll be able to apply CPR to a scenario and be able to provide that CPR for a minimum of 2 minutes to the required speed. Okay. The more that you can nut out these specific SMART goals, so to speak, the better your training delivery is going to be and the more outcome focused it's going to be. What you often find that amateur trainers do is that they keep the session vague and there's no real finer points or milestones that they actually achieve. Any trainer that goes off on tangents is demonstrating they just haven't identified the goals for their session and they don't have the self-discipline to be able to stick to their goals. Okay, so determining the best delivery mode, well, we've certainly got face-to-face, we've got online learning. Okay, now everybody has their preference on this. However, I think even in this day of technology, we need to appreciate that not every content piece and not every subject is well suited to online learning. Okay, as a company, the company may believe that, oh, we'll just get everybody to do online learning. Okay, well, that's okay, but keep in mind that learners learn best when they collaborate. Okay, learners learn best when they've got face-to-face interaction and can ask questions, get immediate feedback. All right, now face-to-face, although there's a perception that takes longer and it takes time out, it actually is a faster way of learning. Also, online learning, it really is up to the individual to have the time management skills, the self-discipline to actually sit down and do the work, and it is requiring learners to be extremely self-responsible. Also, it's a lot harder to guarantee learning outcomes when you put learning onto a platform because it's really the first level of exposure. Now, there's 4 stages to learning, okay? So stage number 1 is exposure to ideas. Second is practice. Third is personalization. And last of all, we've got application. Now, it's a lot easier to go through those 4 stages in a face-to-face environment than it may be on an online environment, okay? Online really should only be used as, first level of exposure and practice, okay? That's why these days a lot of times people are opting for blended learning because it allows a combination of face-to-face and online, okay? So, on the job or work-based delivery, okay? So certainly you can train people on the job as they are doing things. There's some certainly advantages to that, as in it keeps people on the job and working as they're being trained. The disadvantage though is that there's a lot of distractions. It's hard to keep people focused, and certainly it's hard to get everybody in the same room at the same time and all of that, okay? So on the job is one way to do it, and you certainly want to have aspects of that, particularly when a new employee starts at a company. On the job is unavoidable. It's just going to happen, and it's just the way that people are often inducted. And we'll talk about inductions in a delivery cluster, but just be aware that on the job or work-based delivery is certainly a mode of training, okay? Off the job or classroom-based delivery, okay? This is always going to be the higher impact style of delivery. And you'll be able to really generate a lot more power and momentum if you can get everybody in the room collaborating, creating new possibilities, and really practicing those skills that you're trying to impart into your learners. Okay. Distance education, this is sort of becoming synonymous with online learning these days. However, previously the definition, I guess, of distance education would be that the materials would be provided, e.g. a learner guide and access to an assessment, and students would work through it at their own pace. Online learning, however, would be someone logs into a system like Moodle and they answer questions, and there's a discussion board and things like that. Okay, but distance would be fundamentally that there's no real online component at all. Okay, so online delivery, as I just said, you would log into Moodle, you would log into a system, and you would fill out answers to questions. You would read through learner guides. You would collaborate with other learners on tasks, but you'd be able to access learning on your smartphone, things like that. Okay, so blended mode, as I described, is becoming more and more popular. However, it does still have its limitations, and sometimes companies can jump to online learning when really the outcomes and efficacy of online learning is certainly debatable. Okay. Some courses online learning just not appropriate. Other courses certainly it can be appropriate for the knowledge and having people in a face-to-face workshop for some types of knowledge would just be overkill. All right, so it's all going to come back to your learners, the time available, how urgent it is, and what the content is. Okay. So, online face-to-face, we've had a good quality discussion about that. Okay, some questions that will drive the decision. Can a group of people all be released from the same workplace at once? Will you be training on a specific process that is best done in the workplace itself? What facilities and equipment are required and how can you gain access to them? Does the client have the necessary technology and equipment for on-site training? Which mode does the client prefer? Okay, the client's often going to have their own preference, right? Or what they've done up till now, and they'll like to stick to that. Are there any work health and safety considerations as well? Safety is a big thing we always need to think about. Okay, preparing a trainees analysis, just a quick review. So you need to summarize your findings, you need to refine the training goals, you need to make recommendations, you need to outline the rationale for your recommendations, okay? And you need to summarize the benefits of implementing the training program and identify any potential barriers for sure. Okay, so those are just the different stages that we could go through, and I just wanted to highlight those steps because at the end of the day, you need to put forward a proposal to the stakeholders and say, well, based on your needs and based on where you want to go, this is what I see that's going to take to get you there. Here's a training proposal, and this is how we suggest that you implement that training and go from there. Okay. So let's review terminology and documents. As we've talked about, learning strategy is a document that plans the entire qualification. Learning program plan documents the plan for 2 or 3 units, and a session plan documents the delivery for one aspect of the unit. Okay. Let's review typical items that are in a TAS. Well, the qualification name, the units, the target group, method of delivery, method of assessment, timeframes for delivery, qualified delivery and assessment staff, required equipment and resources, how industry was consulted, how the program has been validated. Okay. So in the previous webinar, we talked about what a TAS is, and here's just a reminder of what goes in it, okay? Because you're going to make your training needs analysis proposal, and then if they say, yes, we want you, then you're going to need to develop your TAS, okay? And that's a document that you definitely need to have on hand for document purposes, and also ASQA is going to expect to be able to see it. Volume of learning, how long learning should take, okay? And this is something that certainly should go into your TAS. All right, you can read that definition on the screen there. But essentially, here is the periods of time that a course should go through or go to, depending on the AQF level that you're teaching. So a Cert 1 should go from half a year to a year. Okay, Cert 2, half a year to a year. Cert 3 is 1 to 2 years. Cert 4, half a year to 2 years. Diploma, 1 to 2 years. Advanced Diploma, half a year to 1.5 years to 2 years. Graduate Certificate, half a year to 1 year, and Graduate Diploma, 1 to 2 years. And you can actually see the hours listed out down here as well, okay? So we need to know, and we need to be able to communicate to our clients that if they're looking at running a Cert 3 course, well, this is the expected timeline and the length of time that would require for the learners to get through the course. Okay. Now, as you can see, it's a range, and it's a range because you may find that some learners may already have some of the skills and knowledge, so it may be quicker. However, in our paperwork, we need to be able to document how long that we think it will take based on the existing skills and knowledge, okay? So maybe you've got someone that's been already working in the industry for 6 months or a year. Well, obviously they're going to get through that course a lot quicker than somebody that's brand new, has got no industry experience at all. Okay. Your RTO is required to comply with the AQF for the length of time, and in applying the volume of learning to your programs, you must therefore develop and implement strategies for training and assessment that are consistent with that time frame. Okay. Volume of training definition, it's the amount of actual training that a student receives. Volume of learning is access to all the learning resources. Okay. So learning resources, there's a number of different companies that sell learning resources, and you can always make your own as well, okay? So if you just go online and type in learning resources for XYZ, so maybe childcare and then learning resources, or safety training resources, all right? You're going to get a number of companies that come up, and here's some that you may be able to find that are quite common when you type in a Google search. So you got Inspire, small print. The SSO themselves may put out resources. McGraw-Hill is a very large publishing company for certainly TAE materials as well. Okay, but these are just some companies that sell learning resources. Okay. And certainly we don't take a commission, or there's no relationship between any of those companies as well. Okay. Also, companies come and go. All right. So don't get too attached to a provider of learning resources. Also, make sure that when you get them, you do a thorough analysis of the resources that you get, because if you use something and you find it's non-compliant or it's missing information, that comes back to you as the organizations chose to use it. You certainly can't put blame anywhere else. Okay, determining costs and timelines, very, very important for training because most people don't cost out training very well. And one of the biggest costs can be things like travel, accommodation for trainers. Another one could be photocopying and resources. Okay. Another one could be textbooks. Okay, so everything really needs to be costed out quite effectively and accurately. Okay, so industry feedback, learner feedback, you certainly want to, at the end of once training has been provided, decide, well, how are you going to gather that feedback? Is it going to be telephone surveys? Is it going to be online surveys? Is it going to be surveys on paper at the end of the training? Okay, how are you going to do it? Okay, and as a requirement as an RTO, you do have to gather that feedback, because there's actually 3 quality indicators for an RTO. It is competency completion, how many students get through, also employer satisfaction, and learner engagement. So how much do the learners enjoy the training, and their feedback on the feedback forms. Okay, so you have to gather that feedback. So that is the end of this webinar. All right. So up till now, we've covered certainly the basics of understanding training.gov.au. We've covered the terminology and the I guess a big picture overview of what is VET. Now, the second webinar, we looked at packaging rules in a little bit more detail. We looked at training.gov.au. We looked at some of the documents that you would put together, like the TAEs and learning program plans, session plans, what would go into a session plan. And this session, we started to look at, well, what are some of the things that we would consider as we are planning our training and our entire training program. We looked at some of the questions that we would ask our individual learners and our, big corporate companies, asking those stakeholder engagement questions, making sure that we find out what are their true needs, desires, and wants, and where do they want to get to, okay? So, hope that you have enjoyed this design cluster webinar series. And if you have any questions about the vet sector or questions in general about your assessment, certainly reach out to us, and you will be able to get a response from us. And hopefully you have already joined the TAE graduate group on Facebook. And as always, don't forget to ask us about the Advanced Trainer Bootcamp. And hopefully you are traveling well through your assessments, okay? Thank you so much for your time, and we will see you on the next webinar, okay?